maybe in about 1967, maybe late 66, I had sort of met all these people. And one of the apartment complexes where this group of people were all at was occupied by a woman by the name of Francisca Flores. And Francisca Flores later became known as the founder of the Comisión Femenil, which is sort of the first feminist Chicana, the Chicano Service Action Center. Very, very important woman in terms of organizing Chicanas to get things together. But she used to have a little a newsletter called Carta Editorial, which was just sort of little bits and pieces of news and bits and pieces of text. I would go there and we'd talk, and she was a much more level-headed person than many of the people I'd been hanging around with, because some of these people were talking about doing things that would only get you in trouble or killed. And she was one of these people that had a different point of view. She had sort of a feminine point of view, had a feminist point of view, and was a little bit more studied in literature, and introduced me to a handful of things. And I would help her fold these things, and we'd send them out. And then from there, she started the magazine, Regeneración, which was the same title of the newspaper that was put out by the Flores Magón brothers during the Mexican Revolution out of Los Angeles, near Roosevelt High School. So it was in the same neighborhood, and sort of it was paying homage to the sort of the Mexican Revolution, as though there had been a continuation of the revolutionary spirit through literature that were. And so she worked on this magazine probably for a couple years or so, and quite literally in the midst of the Chicano moratorium riot, right as the police were attacking people and tear gas was flowing everywhere and bottles were flying everywhere, we were kind of, everyone's going in different directions. I bumped into her and she handed me the magazine. I took it, I read it, I liked it, I wrote a little note, and she published that note and says, well, welcome, thanks for being the editor now. And that's how I became the editor. But I had kind of, she had been one of my mentors basically. So I took on that challenge, having no experience at all with graphic arts. My father and my grandfather were both printers. I knew a little bit of concept about that. In fact, my grandfather had a shop just down the street here. My father worked here for a long time, and then he worked elsewhere. I decided that one of the things about the magazine was that it had no visuals. And I knew one or two people that I knew that could draw, which was Patsy Valdez and Willie Herron. We decided to offer it in a different mode. I invited Patsy and Willie to work, and Patsy had other ideas and she had to do other things. And so was Willie Herron, and I worked on the first issue together, in which we kind of did different drawings. And I wasn't very clear on how to put together a publication yet, and yet we managed to get it done. And when it went out, we got a little bit of response because people were wondering why we were putting drawings in it. And it was very, one of the things about East LA that was kind of not understood, I guess, is it was a very harshly conservative place. It was almost an orthodoxy of some sort. It was, everyone sort of shared certain values. And should you break certain social codes, anyone in the community could mete out punishment to stop you, because one wrong move, you would cause everyone else to suffer. And so then again, this kind of falls into sort of this warlike kind of condition where, you know, you're not about to rock the boat because we're all going to drown, so you better behave, you know. So, but being the person that I was and the kind of experiences I had, which was going out and then coming back in, I was always breaking the rules. And I felt that we actually needed to crank it up a little bit. And well, here I will mention Grunk one more time. I'd seen his work before and I liked it. And I invited him and I invited Mundo Mesa to do work. And by this time I decided, well, I too would probably give my hand at this. And we started, Mundo Mesa couldn't work with us. He wanted to go off and do other things. But it was, this is basically the way we started all working together as a group, OSCO. We worked on the magazines and we got a chance to know each other a little bit better in the process of working during long nights of literally drawing. We would get space and then we'd fill it up, which meant that we had the galleys that were laid out. We'd have little blocks of space and everyone would get their share. And had free to create any image you wanted, and that's exactly what we did. And so when that first issue came out, where all four of us worked, it created sort of kind of an uproar. On some level, it's a Catholic story. So, but it was kind of fun because there is a moment where Willie Herron and Umberto Sandoval jump into the Hollenbeck Lake. And then there was great discord in the end as to who could see these pictures and who couldn't. And it was one of the first, it sort of touched on the idea that Oscar would eventually break up. That caused kind of the mix-up. I always wanted to show certain things, and it was this idea of control, authorship, and in the end it was Umberto Sandoval's piece, of course. But then there were always rumblings as to what's going to happen to the group, because we never really functioned exactly as a group. We would just kind of coalesce together and hang out. And this idea that we were collective was never the case. It was never that idea. It was never formal. And we were kind of almost acted, and I've mentioned this before in writing, that we're kind of almost like a surrogate family. And in the end, I was the only one that actually had a father that was present. I was the only one that never shaved off his eyebrows. Certain things that had I done that, I would have been beaten to death, by my uncles. My father would have held me down, I think, deservedly so at that point. But this idea that I could push on some levels, but I couldn't join on others. Patsy, too, had a very strict mother. She could do only certain things, under certain things, because we're all very young at that point still. And we had sort of these relationships with family and peer pressure. And then Willie Herron, again, had a different kind of upbringing, very strict upbringing. And Umberto Sandoval had a very extremely harsh upbringing, probably even more so than Willie Herron, actually. Altogether, we had all experienced different levels of personal violence, social violence, but in the end, we all kind of had a very similar response, was to laugh at it as a way of diminishing its effects. And that's kind of where we had all common ground. And that's actually where we actually all agreed to work, because I don't think we all agreed politically. We didn't have the same understanding of what art was supposed to be or who we were supposed to be. We just knew that it was fun to laugh, and that laughing felt good, and that feeling good was something to laugh about. And so that's what was sort of the primary goal. And then that was sort of my theme from a very early age, and that's what I constantly push, and I still do.